In the previous video, we explored the complete story of Animal Farm by George Orwell. We followed the rise of the animals, their rebellion, and the gradual transformation of their society. But Animal Farm is not just a story about animals. It is a political allegory, a reflection of real historical events. And at the center of it lies one of the most important revolutions in modern history, the Russian Revolution. If you haven't watched the previous breakdown, you can find the link in the description. Now, in this video, we will go deeper. Because to understand Animal Farm fully, we must first understand the revolution it was built upon. The Russian Revolution was a major political and social uprising that took place in 1917. It marked the end of centuries of imperial rule under the Tsars in Russia. At that time, Russia was ruled by a monarchy where power was concentrated in the hands of a single emperor. Most of the population, especially workers and peasants, lived in poverty and had very little control over their lives. Growing inequality, poor living conditions, and political unrest led to widespread dissatisfaction. This eventually resulted in revolution, where people demanded change, equality, and a new system of governance. The revolution completely transformed Russia and led to the rise of a new political ideology. Before the revolution, Russia was ruled by Tsar Nicholas II under an absolute monarchy. The Tsar held complete power over the government, military, and society. Ordinary people had very little political freedom or say in decision-making. Most of the population consisted of peasants and industrial workers who lived in harsh conditions. They faced long working hours, low wages, and widespread poverty. Food shortages and economic inequality made daily life even more difficult. While the ruling class lived comfortably, the majority struggled to survive. This deep divide between the rich and the poor created growing anger across society. Most workers and peasants in pre-revolutionary Russia lived extremely difficult lives. In cities, industrial workers spent long hours inside factories with unsafe conditions. They worked with heavy machines, often without proper safety or rest. In rural areas, peasants worked the land from sunrise to sunset with very little reward. Despite their constant effort, many still struggled to afford basic food and shelter. Education and healthcare were limited, especially for the lower class. Illness, hunger, and exhaustion were common in everyday life. This harsh reality created a deep sense of frustration and helplessness among the majority of the population. As hardship continued, people began to question the existing system. Many started believing that life did not have to remain this unfair forever. New political ideas began to spread among workers and intellectuals. These ideas spoke about equality, shared ownership, and the removal of absolute power. Small groups of thinkers and revolutionaries began discussing change in secret meetings. They believed that the current system could be replaced with something more just. Over time, these ideas slowly gained attention among the struggling population. What once was silent dissatisfaction was now turning into organized thought. In 1917, growing unrest finally reached a breaking point in Russia. Mass protests and strikes began across major cities. Workers demanded better conditions, food, and political change. The army, which was meant to protect the Tsar's rule, began to lose loyalty. Many soldiers refused to suppress the protesting crowds. This weakened the authority of the Tsar significantly. As pressure increased from all sides, the government became unstable. Eventually, the Tsar was forced to step down, ending centuries of imperial rule. This marked the beginning of a new political era in Russia. The revolution forced major change in Russia. As protests grew stronger, Tsar Nicholas II lost control over the country. The military stopped fully supporting him. His authority weakened rapidly across cities and regions. Facing pressure from all sides, the Tsar eventually stepped down. This ended centuries of imperial rule in Russia. For the first time, power was no longer in the hands of one ruler. A new political system was beginning to form. After the fall of the Tsar, new political groups began competing for control. One of the most important groups was the Bolsheviks. They were led by Vladimir Lenin. The Bolsheviks believed that power should belong to the workers and not the elite. They promised equality, land redistribution, and better living conditions. Their ideas gained strong support among workers and soldiers. Over time, they became the most powerful revolutionary group in Russia. This marked the beginning of a new leadership structure in the country. To understand Animal Farm, we need to connect its characters to real history. Vladimir Lenin represents the early revolutionary idea in Russia. In Animal Farm, this role is reflected through Old Major. Old Major inspires the animals with the idea of freedom and equality. He does not lead the revolution himself, but he starts the idea. Similarly, Lenin's ideas inspired the Russian Revolution, even though he did not live through its final transformation. Both represent the beginning of a movement that promises equality and change. Joseph Stalin was one of the key leaders who rose after Lenin. Over time, he gained full control over the Soviet Union. His rule became highly centralized and authoritarian. In Animal Farm, Napoleon represents Stalin. Both begin as revolutionary figures, but gradually focus on power and control. Instead of sharing leadership, they concentrate authority in their own hands. This marks a shift from revolutionary ideals to strict control. Leon Trotsky was one of the main leaders during the Russian Revolution. He believed in spreading revolutionary ideas and improving society through active change. However, he later came into conflict with Stalin. This conflict led to his removal from power and exile. In Animal Farm, Snowball represents Trotsky. Snowball is intelligent, creative, and full of plans for improvement. But like Trotsky, he is eventually pushed out of leadership by his rival. Both figures represent idealism that is removed during power struggles. In the Russian Revolution, the working class and peasants carried the weight of the entire system. They worked in factories and fields, producing everything needed for society. Despite their effort, they remained poor and overworked. In Animal Farm, Boxer represents this working class. He is strong, loyal, and endlessly hardworking. He believes that working harder will solve every problem. Both Boxer and the working class symbolize people who sustain a system but do not benefit equally from it. In the Soviet system after the revolution, propaganda played a major role in shaping public opinion. Information was often controlled and presented in a way that supported those in power. Many people were told what to believe rather than discovering the truth themselves. In Animal Farm, Squealer represents this propaganda system. He explains, justifies, and reshapes events so that the animals continue to trust the leadership. Even when things change, he convinces others that everything is still fair and necessary. Both reflect how information can be used to maintain control over society. After the revolution, maintaining power required strict control. In Soviet Russia, this was enforced through secret police and security forces. Their role was to suppress opposition and maintain obedience. Fear became a tool of control in society. In Animal Farm, Napoleon's dogs represent this system. They are trained to obey him completely and act without question. Whenever there is resistance or doubt, they enforce his authority. Both symbolize how fear is used to maintain power after revolution. In any revolution, new rules are created to guide society. In Soviet Russia, a new system of laws and governance replaced the old order. These laws were meant to ensure equality and fairness for everyone. However, over time, these principles were gradually changed and interpreted differently by those in power. In Animal Farm, the 7 Commandments represent this system of rules. They are originally created to ensure equality among all animals. But as time passes, they are quietly altered to benefit the ruling group. Both reflect how written laws can be changed to serve those in control. The Russian Revolution began with promises of equality, freedom, and justice. It aimed to remove class divisions and create a fair society for all. However, over time, the system that emerged did not fully reflect these ideals. Power became concentrated in the hands of a few leaders. Instead of equality, a new form of control developed. In Animal Farm, this contrast is clearly shown. The animals begin with dreams of freedom, but end up under a similar system of control. This highlights the gap between revolutionary ideals and real outcomes. George Orwell wrote Animal Farm to criticize how revolutions can lose their original purpose. The story is not about animals, but about political systems and human behavior. It shows how power can change ideals over time. Even revolutions that begin with equality can end in control. Animal Farm reflects how truth, leadership, and freedom can be manipulated. The novel remains relevant because it explains how power works in real societies. Animal Farm is more than a story about animals. It is a reflection of how power can change systems and societies. The novel shows how revolutions begin with hope but can slowly shift into control. Characters in the story represent real historical figures and events. Through this allegory, Orwell explains how truth, leadership, and equality can be manipulated. The key lesson is that power must always be questioned. Otherwise, even the strongest ideals can be rewritten over time. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked the video. For more such videos, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.